Doom Scribblers, we are going to talk about tone matching and going forward. So you have got the editing primer that I put in the room a couple of days ago. And yesterday I asked everybody to take a look at that and have a think about what their strengths are, what they bring to the table, and where they believe they still need help. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is to take that conversation back to your team rooms and talk together about what you bring to the table and what you need from your fellow writers. We're going to, a few teams are barreling towards the end of finishing books, and you're going to be going in for your edits now. And in this edit, you're going to be doing a couple of different things. Of course, you're going to go through your own work and apply the lessons that you've learnt in the last couple of months to those early chapters when you didn't know about replacing dialogue tags with action that moves the plot or the story forward, why in close third we don't want adverbs, why we want to get filtering out, what close third really means, because there were people at the beginning who've written in deep POV who did not believe me when I said we are inside the head of your main protagonist in close third. Everything on the page, even though you're writing in third, comes from their perspective. So you're going to need to do a pass through your chapters, taking care of those things, not changing the plot. Don't change anything that will have an impact on anybody else's chapters, even though some of you are going to have to do some pretty rigorous rewriting so that you don't have, for example, a chunk of setup and then a chunk of dialogue. So in the beginning chapters, a lot of people had those things separated out, which is not unusual at all. Now you know that you need to blend those things together so it comes as a whole, so they are moving through their lives, talking while they're doing everything they need to be doing. They don't stop and talk. You're going to be able to hear a small dog complaining. He's been complaining all day and I'm working on it. So just ignore the little whimpers in the side, because otherwise I will have to start this over again, and I've already started again twice. So you're going to do a pass of your own work using the editing primer to get it as tight as you possibly can. But you've got to keep in mind that this needs to be a coherent piece. This needs to be something that with your fellow writers falls together as if one writer wrote everything. Now, it's not going to be perfectly matched, but that's okay because you're writing from 3 different POVs, and that the POV is driven by the interiority of your main protagonist for each of those threads. So of course there are going to be differences, but we can't have differences that are so deep that our readers get whiplash. Now that we know this and we've got this vocabulary in common, writing forward is going to be a lot easier for tone matching because you know much more about the people in your room and how they write. You've been reading their chapters. For some of you who are still writing very, very long, complicated sentences, go and find an online tool like Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly. There are free ones out there that you can run your chapter through, and it will tell you, you're getting to a 30-word sentence here, and for our readers, that's too long. You're writing in action. Your sentences are much shorter. Break those sentences up. Don't have a run-on sentence. Back to writing 101. So going forward, it's going to be quite a lot easier to do that. Do your pass yourself. Keep in mind who else is writing with you in your room. But then you're going to need to weave everything together. So all of those storylines that are in your book, you're going to weave them together. And you need to be looking at, does the closing hook from this chapter resonate with the opening hook for the next chapter? Are they both really hooky enough? Do we not have slow chapters back to back? I pretty much think we're not going to run into that because we did such good planning to begin with. But you're going to need to look at those things. So take the work that you did yesterday and look at who brings which strengths to the page and what you need help with, so that when you are reading other people's chapters, you can help with the things that you're really good at, and you can ask for help for the things you're not as good at. Does that make sense? I want to use what you did yesterday with looking at your strengths and looking at the places where you still need help to build a collective pool of talent and make you into better editors of each other's work. Because now you know more about what you're good at, you can comment about that on the page. And now that we're all professionals, everyone is leaving their ego at the door. Because if you're a professional, that's what you do. You get out of the way of the work. So there's another part to this. We are going to do at least 2 passes. So you're going to do a pass of your own work with the editing primer, and then you're going to blend chapters together and you're going to do another pass. How we're going to do that with this many writers and readers in the room, you're going to have to talk about that in your groups, about how you're going to do everybody reading everything and how you're going to give notes. Is it going to go on a person-by-person pass? In some rooms, there are only 3 writers and they've been writing together from the beginning and reading everybody's chapters, so they have a much, much better idea of what other people are doing. But there are some rooms that have got 5, and that's going to be a much bigger challenge. So talk to each other about what you're going to do for the long read through and giving feedback to each other, and see if you can't come up with something that doesn't tax everybody to breaking point, because we really don't want that. Then, going forward, you've got the nuts and bolts now. You know the basics of the hero's journey and writing in close third. There's still stuff to learn. I'm still seeing people who are getting this and that wrong, literally this and that. Because we are writing in close third and it feels like first, people slip into using something that sounds like we're writing in first and present instead of writing in third and past. But it's tiny, tiny, tiny things. There are some people who are still struggling with the shape of a chapter, building to a climax. But I'm here to help, and I'm seeing breakthroughs happen. I'm seeing people get the hang of that. But what I want to do for the people who are clearly getting it now, who've got the basics down, I want to give them the option to write forward. I know a lot of people have felt like, wow, I lose momentum because I write a chapter and it goes away and then it comes back a few days later. And because you've got the peer review system, it's like a week later by the time it gets to me. So the people who are getting almost no red ink on their pages, I want them to be able to write forward. Say, for example, to write 3 chapters at a time before it comes to a peer review and then comes to me. There are people who aren't ready for that yet, and I will tell you whether or not you're ready for that. As your own metric, if you're still getting a lot of red on the page, a lot of feedback from me, you're not ready to do that yet, but that's our goal. Our goal is for you to be able to write forward and get momentum and not lose that momentum between chapters. Josie was saying to me today, one of the great things about writing forward is that you don't lose context and you don't lose, she had another word and now it's completely gone out of my head because it's been a very long day. So if you don't know where you fall, you can check in with me. Check in with me and I will let you know whether or not you can write forward yet. But that's your goal. Your goal is to get to a place where you get almost no red ink on the page from me. We've still got stuff to learn, right? We've still got things to learn. I was talking in one group the other day about goal attack thwart and whether or not you can set up a goal in one chapter and have the thwart pay off 3 chapters later. And you can. But that's a pretty sophisticated storytelling technique, which I was not willing to discuss with you until you had nailed goal attack thwart. And almost everyone has now. Almost everyone has got that down. It makes for a really, really compact, well-driven story. And now we're going to work out what else can you do with that when you're looking at your chapters and you're planning forward. Other things that we're going to be looking at are how you layer in sensory details. So, everybody says we want sensory details on the page without using filtering. Another one I did not want to touch until I was absolutely sure that you understood what filtering is and you understood that I would yeet you into the sun if you used any filtering language, because we want to be inside the head of the main protagonist. We do not want to be outside watching them look at something. So this means there are still lessons ahead. But I would say that we are probably aiming at something like a video a week from me for probably about the next 6 weeks. And then a lot of stuff is going to become optional because you really are going to have the nuts and bolts. And the place that I can help you most is going to be with the actual work on the page and places where you're struggling a bit. My most valuable place is on the page with you and showing you how to get there. But for planning purposes, think of probably the next month. We are going to still be having lessons coming at you, but after that, we're going to slow down and things are going to become optional. I want everyone to keep learning, but just for those of you who are planners and who think about your time in that way, perhaps that's a useful thing to know. All right, questions? Comments, thoughts, opinions, bring it. All right, Doom Scribblers, goodbye.